Introduction: A political gladiator in the family shadow. Clarence M. Mitchell, 361392012, known in the political arenas of Maryland as the Bear or C3, was a figure of immense consequence and complexity. Born into what was arguably the most powerful civil rights dynasty in the state, the Mitchell-Jackson family of Baltimore, his life was a constant negotiation between a celebrated inheritance and the drive to forge his own distinctive identity. His career, marked by trailblazing achievements and a precipitous fall, offers a compelling lens through which to view the evolution of the American civil rights movement. It charts a critical transition from the national legislative lobbying that defined his father's generation to the potent combination of state-level governance and direct action street politics that characterize his own. The narrative of Clarence M. Mitchell III is inextricably linked to that of his father, Clarence M. Mitchell Jr., the legendary NAACP lobbyist so effective he was dubbed the 101st Senator. This association, while a source of immense political capital, also created a shadow so vast that the achievements of the son are often conflated with or eclipsed by those of the father. To understand C3 is to understand this dynamic not as a biographical footnote, but as a central force that shaped his political style and trajectory. Contemporaries like former U.S. Representative Kwesi Mfume saw him not as a mere inheritor, but as a unique force, a political gladiator with a rugged individuality who was, in the truest sense, an American original. History arcs from the radical fervor of the 1960s, where as a young student he co-founded the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, to the halls of power in Annapolis, where he became one of the youngest and most influential legislators in Maryland's history. Yet this trajectory of ascent was tragically cut short by a federal conviction in the WedTech scandal, a controversy that permanently complicates his legacy. "Don't make my father larger or smaller in life than he actually was," he stated following his father's death. He saw wrong and tried to make it right. He saw pain and tried to heal it. He saw racism and tried to stop it. This report seeks to honor that request, presenting a nuanced documentary of a pivotal, yet flawed, champion of civil rights. Part 1. Forged in the Movement: The Making of a Mitchell. To be born a Mitchell in 20th century Baltimore was to be born into the command structure of the civil rights movement. The family, often called the Black Kennedys, had methodically constructed a multi-generational, multifaceted machine dedicated to dismantling segregation. Law, grassroots organizing, legislative lobbying, and economic advocacy were not abstract ideals, they were the family business. Clarence M. Mitchell Jr. is not merely influenced by this environment, he was forged by it, immersed from childhood in the strategies and sacrifices of the struggle. The Mitchell-Jackson dynasty, the family's influence radiated from 4 central figures, each mastering a different theater in the war against racial injustice. The patriarch Clarence M. Mitchell Jr., the father, operated at the highest echelons of federal power. As the NAACP's chief lobbyist for nearly 3 decades, he was the lion in the lobby, a relentless and respected presence on Capitol Hill. His life's work was the passage of the cornerstones of federal civil rights law: the Civil Rights Act of 1957, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and the Fair Housing Act of 1968. His close working relationships with presidents, including Lyndon B. Johnson, made him one of the most effective legislative strategists of the era. The matriarch, Juanita Jackson Mitchell, the mother, wielded the law as her weapon. As the first African-American woman to practice law in Maryland, she complemented her husband's legislative work by fighting for civil rights in the courtroom. establishing a formidable reputation as a litigator. The organizer, Lily M. Jackson, was the family's grassroots general. After a near-death experience in which she believed she made a pact with God to serve her people, she took leadership of a faltering Baltimore NAACP branch and, through tireless organizing, transformed it into the largest and most powerful in the nation. She built a network of recruiters in every church, every community organization, creating a formidable base of popular support for the movement. The congressman, Perrin Mitchell, broke barriers in electoral politics, becoming the first African American from Maryland elected to Congress. He focused his legislative efforts on economic justice, championing the creation of federal minority business enterprise (MBE) programs, which he viewed as the critical next phase of the civil rights struggle. Born on December 14, 1939, in St. Paul, Minnesota. During his father's tenure with the Urban League, Clarence M. Mitchell III was raised in Baltimore at the very heart of this activist vortex. He attended local public schools before graduating from Gonzaga High School in Washington, D.C., and later studied at the University of Maryland and Morgan State University. His upbringing provided him with an unparalleled education in the mechanics of power and social change. The family's comprehensive strategy, attacking segregation through federal lobbying, the courts, community organizing, and economic policy, covered nearly every angle. However, there was one crucial arena where the family lacked a dedicated full-time presence: inside the Maryland General Assembly. Mitchell III's decision to enter state politics was therefore not simply a matter of personal ambition. It was a profoundly strategic move that filled a logical gap in the family's 360-degree assault on systemic racism, bringing their fight directly into the halls of state power. Table 8. Information displayed visually with names, relationships, roles, and achievements as specified in the script. Part 2. The Young Radical. Co-founding SNCC and the Fight from the Streets. While his father masterfully navigated the corridors of power in Washington, Clarence M. Mitchell III began his own journey in the crucible of student activism, choosing a path that was more confrontational and radical than that of his parents' generation. In 1960, while a student at Morgan State University, he attended the founding conference of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, at Shaw University in Raleigh, North Carolina. This act placed him at the birth of one of the most dynamic and influential organizations of the era, alongside future leaders like Julian Bond and Marion Barry, and under the philosophical guidance of civil rights visionary Ella Baker. His role within SNCC was substantial. He was entrusted with the position of treasurer, a critical role in a burgeoning organization reliant on fundraising and careful resource management. His work extended to the front lines of the movement, participating in dangerous voter registration drives in the Deep South, a core SNCC activity aimed at dismantling the political infrastructure of white supremacy. Simultaneously, he was a leader back home in the Morgan College sit-in movement, which applied direct action tactics to successfully desegregate numerous department stores, restaurants, and hotels in Baltimore. His activism also connected him with the central figure of the movement. Multiple accounts confirm that he worked closely with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., bridging the gap between the student-led wing and the established leadership of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC. Mitchell's choice to align with SNCC represented a significant ideological step. The NAACP, the organization of his parents, was built on a foundation of legal challenges and legislative lobbying. a methodical, institutional approach. By the 1960s, many younger activists viewed this strategy as too slow and prone to compromise. SNCC, in contrast, was born from the impatience and moral urgency of the sit-in movement. It championed nonviolent, direct action, grassroots mobilization, and a decentralized leadership structure. By co-founding and taking a leadership role in SNCC, Mitchell was not simply following in his father's footsteps, he was consciously engaging in a different, more radical form of struggle. His career would become a unique synthesis of these two worlds. He carried the institutional credibility of the Mitchell name, but was politically forged in the revolutionary fire of SNCC. This dual inheritance equipped him with a political perspective and a set of tactical skills that few of his contemporaries possessed, allowing him to navigate seamlessly from the protest line to the legislative chamber. His oral history records a deliberate transition from treasurer of SNCC to his early political career, indicating a calculated decision to carry the energy of the streets into the structures of state power. Part 3. From Activist to Legislator. The Trailblazer in Annapolis. The strategic pivot from activism to electoral politics proved remarkably successful for Clarence M. Mitchell III. He translated the energy of the movement and the power of his family name into a history-making political career in Maryland. In 1962, at the age of just 22, he was elected to the Maryland House of Delegates, becoming the youngest person ever to achieve that distinction. When he was sworn in at 23, he articulated a clear philosophy born from his activist roots.
For too many years, we have been content to sit back and bellyache about bad politics and do nothing, he declared. The only way for us to be sure that we get fair representation is to represent ourselves.
This principle of self-representation guided his career. After serving 4 years in the House, 1963-1967, he ran for the Maryland State Senate and won, again, becoming the youngest person to serve in that body. He would remain a senator representing Baltimore City for nearly 2 decades, until 1986. His tenure was not merely symbolic. He rapidly ascended into the highest ranks of the Democratic leadership. He was also served as the Senate's Deputy Majority Leader from 1975 to 1978 and as Majority Whip in 1979, positions that gave him significant influence over the state's legislative agenda. He also chaired the powerful Executive Nominations Committee, which vets and approves key gubernatorial appointments, and was a member of the influential Judicial Proceedings Committee. Mitchell's influence was not confined to Maryland. His leadership was recognized on a national scale when he was elected to serve as president of the National Black Caucus of State Legislators from 1979 to 1985. This position, coupled with his role as a special advisor to Presidents John F. Kennedy, Lyndon B. Johnson, and Jimmy Carter, cemented his status as a significant national political figure. Mitchell's career arc perfectly embodies the strategic evolution of the civil rights movement itself. The core work of SNCC in the South was voter registration, predicated on the belief that securing the ballot was the essential first step toward gaining real political power. Mitchell's own life became a powerful testament to this strategy. He moved directly from being a SNCC organizer to being a candidate, demonstrating that the grassroots energy of the movement could be channeled into electoral victory. His election was a potent symbol that African Americans were no longer just demanding a seat at the table. They were winning elections and taking those seats for themselves. His subsequent rise to leadership positions within the Maryland Senate proved that this was not a token presence. He became a true insider, wielding the very institutional power that his activism had sought to influence from the outside. Part 4. Championing Economic Justice in Maryland Law. Once inside the Maryland General Assembly, Senator Mitchell focused his legislative efforts on what he and other leaders, like his uncle, Perrin Mitchell, saw as the next frontier of the civil rights struggle: economic justice. He understood that legal desegregation and voting rights, while monumental achievements, would remain hollow victories if not accompanied by the dismantling of the economic structures of racism. His two most celebrated legislative accomplishments reflect this forward-looking agenda. First, Mitchell is widely credited with sponsoring Maryland's first Fair Employment Bill. This landmark legislation was designed to combat widespread discrimination in the workplace, a barrier that kept countless African Americans from securing jobs and promotions commensurate with their skills. In the context of the 1960s, when local and state governments were just beginning to codify anti-discrimination protections in employment and public accommodations, this was a critical piece of legislation that extended the promise of equality into the economic sphere. By sponsoring this bill, Mitchell took a leading role in translating the moral imperative of the movement into the binding force of state law. Second, and in direct alignment with his family's focus on economic empowerment, Mitchell was a key figure in the creation of the Maryland Office of Minority Business Enterprise. The state's MBE program, established by the General Assembly in 1978, is recognized as the oldest of its kind in the United States. Its purpose was to ensure that minority-owned firms had a fair opportunity to participate in the lucrative arena of state procurement and contracting. This initiative was the state-level implementation of the same philosophy his uncle, Congressman Perrin Mitchell, was advancing at the federal level. It was a structural solution designed to redirect public funds to foster the growth of minority-owned businesses, thereby building wealth and opportunity in communities long excluded from the economic mainstream. These legislative achievements demonstrate that Senator Mitchell was not simply a generic civil rights champion. He was a sophisticated and strategic lawmaker with a clear economic agenda. His work on fair employment and minority business enterprise showed a deep understanding that true freedom required not just the absence of legal segregation, but the presence of economic opportunity. Part 5. The Fall, the WedTech Scandal and its Aftermath. The formidable political career of Clarence M. Mitchell III came to an abrupt and tragic end in 1987, a year after he left the Senate. His conviction in the sprawling WedTech scandal not only concluded his time in public service but also cast a permanent shadow over his legacy. The scandal revolved around the WedTech Corporation, a defense contractor based in the Bronx that had fraudulently secured hundreds of millions of dollars in no-bid federal contracts by exploiting a Small Business Administration (SBA) program designed to assist legitimate minority-owned businesses. The Mitchell family became entangled when WedTech's fraudulent status came under investigation by the House Committee on Small Business, which was chaired by none other than Congressman Perrin Mitchell. In a desperate attempt to quash the inquiry, WedTech officials hired Clarence M. Mitchell, third brother Michael B. Mitchell. The prosecution's case asserted that the brothers were paid $50,000 not for legitimate legal services as they claimed, but to use their family connection to illegally influence and obstruct their uncle's investigation. A key piece of evidence was a retainer letter that witnesses testified was merely a cover-up for the payment. Throughout the investigation and trial, no evidence ever emerged to suggest that Congressman Perrin Mitchell was aware of, let alone complicit in, his nephew's scheme. He was described by the U.S. Attorney as an unwitting victim. A federal grand jury indicted the brothers on multiple charges including conspiracy, wire fraud, and obstruction. Following a trial, the jury acquitted them of conspiracy but found them guilty on charges of wire fraud and endeavoring to obstruct a grand jury. Clarence M. Mitchell III was sentenced to 54 months in federal prison and ultimately served 18 months.
For his part, Mitchell maintained his innocence and framed the prosecution as part of a politically motivated pattern, once stating that 3 out of 5 black elected officials in this country are under investigation by this administration.
The conviction was a tragedy of profound irony. Mitchell's downfall was precipitated by his corrupt dealings with a company that was perverting a minority business enterprise program, the very type of economic justice initiative his family had championed and for which he had legislated in Maryland. He was convicted of using the political capital and credibility his family had earned through decades of civil rights struggle for personal enrichment and the obstruction of justice. The crime was not just a violation of federal law, it was a betrayal of the core principles that animated his own political career and his family's historic legacy. Part 6. The Measure of a Man. The Contested Legacy of C3. Clarence M. Mitchell, III, passed away on October 11, 2012, at the age of 72, leaving behind a legacy as complex and formidable as the man himself. Any final assessment of his life must grapple with the tension between his pioneering contributions as a civil rights activist and legislator and the criminal conviction that ended his career. He was neither a saint nor a simple villain, but a pivotal and deeply human figure whose story challenges simplistic narratives of the civil rights movement and the generation that translated its ideals into governance. In the wake of his death, many of Maryland's leaders chose to remember him for his foundational work. Governor Martin O'Malley eulogized him as a true public servant who dedicated his life to secure equal rights for all under the law. Lieutenant Governor Anthony Brown credited him with forging a path for subsequent generations of lawmakers and championing legislation that helped ensure all Marylanders could enjoy equal rights under the law. This perspective emphasizes the first half of his career, the young SNCC radical who became a powerful force for good in Annapolis. Others remembered the warrior spirit that defined his political style. Kwesi Mfume's depiction of him as a political gladiator who never backed down from a fight captures the essence of a man known for his charisma and tenacity. This spirit was applied not only to high-profile legislation, but also to community-level work, such as founding the People's Democratic Action Organization to give a political voice to West Baltimore residents, and using his senatorial scholarships to help underprivileged youth attend college. In a final act that connected his life's work to his activist origins, his family established the Senator Clarence M. Mitchell III Memorial Endowed Scholarship Fund at Morgan State University, the institution where his journey began. Ultimately, the legacy of C3 is a cautionary tale about the burdens of inheritance, the complexities of power, and the personal frailties that can tarnish great public works. His early career was a story of historic importance, embodying the successful transition from protest to political power. His later life was defined by a scandal that struck at the heart of his family's mission. The desire of his contemporaries to emphasize his achievements over his failings suggests that, in the collective memory of Maryland, his contributions to the cause of civil rights are seen as his most enduring legacy. He remained a genuine trailblazer whose personal failings created a permanent and tragic asterisk next to his name, forcing a more challenging and complete understanding of the imperfect individuals who so often forge historical progress. This has been a Sharri Plaza presentation.